You know that feeling when you go somewhere new and it just has a vibe, a unique soul? What is it that makes one place feel so completely different from another? Well, it's not by chance. Turns out, it's kind of like a recipe, cooked up over centuries with some very specific ingredients. So, what are those ingredients? Is it the language you hear people speaking on the street, the style of the buildings, or maybe the legends that get passed down from generation to generation? It's a bit of all of that, a really complex mix. And today, we're going to break down that recipe. To figure this out, we're actually going to travel back in time to medieval India. This map right here is going to be our guide. We're going to check out a few different places, each with its own incredible story about how it became, well, itself. Ready? Let's dive in. All right, first stop, we're heading down to the southwest to look at what might be the most foundational ingredient of any culture, language. We're going to see how the Chera kingdom and the Malayalam language basically grew up together. They're totally intertwined. Okay, so check this out. It all started back in the 9th century. The Chera rulers did something pretty radical for the time. Instead of just using Sanskrit, the language of the elites, for all their official stuff, they started using the local language Malayalam in their inscriptions. This was a huge deal. It was like they were saying, our local language matters. From there, you see the first literary works popping up a few centuries later. And by the 14th century, you have texts like the Lila Tilakam that are all about grammar and poetry. It really cemented Malayalam as a language with its own power and identity. And here's a great example of how cultures aren't just one thing. They're a mix. They had this literary style called Manipravalam. The name itself literally means diamonds and corals. Just think about that image for a second. It's this beautiful way of describing how they blended two languages, Sanskrit, the fancy diamond, with the local language, the coral. They didn't just pick one, they wove them together to create something totally new and beautiful. Okay, so language is one key ingredient. But what about faith? Let's hop over to the east, to Orissa and Bengal. Here, we're going to see how religion can become this incredibly powerful symbol that pulls a whole region together. This story is amazing. It shows you how a regional god can come to be. It all starts with a simple wooden deity, worshipped by local tribal people in Orissa. Just a local god. But then it starts to get identified with Vishnu, a major Hindu god. Then, boom, in the 12th century, a king builds this massive temple for it in Puri. And suddenly, this local deity is transformed into Jagannatha, the Lord of the world. It became so important that a king in the next century literally said, I'm not the real ruler, I'm just the god's deputy. How's that for influence? Right, and when something becomes that powerful symbol, it's not just about religion anymore. It's about political power. The Jagannatha temple became so important for ruling the region that pretty much every major power that came through, the Mughals, the Marathas, even the English East India Company, they all wanted to control it. They knew that if you controlled the temple, you had a way to legitimize your rule and win over the local people. Now over in Bengal, you see a different kind of regional signature, this time in their buildings. And what I love about this is that when they built their temples, they didn't copy the big, grand styles of the empires. Nope. They looked at the simple thatched roof huts that everyday people lived in, and they built their temples to look like that. It's such a cool idea, right? Finding the sacred in the ordinary. And culture is smart, It adapts to where it is. Take Bengal, for example. It's full of rivers, so there's fish everywhere. Now, normally, Brahmanas have very strict dietary rules. But in Bengal, the local reality, the sheer abundance of fish, was so strong that a unique custom developed. Religious texts there actually gave Bengali Brahmanas the okay to eat fish. It's a perfect case of culture saying, okay, let's work with what we've got. So we've got language, religion, architecture, even food. Culture expresses itself in so many ways. Let's talk about the performing arts now. Because things like dance and music, they often need powerful people, patrons, to really thrive. And the story of the dance form Kathak, it's a perfect example of this. The clue is right in the name. Kathak comes from the word katha, and katha just means story. So the very first Kathaks were basically storytellers. They'd be in temples in North India using dance, music, and expressions to tell these epic religious stories to the people. That's where it all began. But Kathak didn't stay in the temples forever. First, it got caught up in this big religious wave called the Bhakti movement, which was all about personal, passionate devotion. So the dances started telling these intense love stories, like the ones about Radha and Krishna. Then it moved from the temple to the royal court. The Mughals and other rulers loved it, and under their patronage, it got refined and polished into the complex, beautiful classical art form that we recognize today.
And what's really interesting is that different patrons led to different styles. So depending on which court you were in, the dance looked different. In the courts of Rajasthan, you got the Jaipur Gharana or school. But over in the court of Oudh, the Lucknow Gharana developed. It's the same dance, Kathak, but with its own regional twists, all because of who was supporting.
All right, so patrons can shape art. But what about ideals? For our last ingredient, we're heading to Rajasthan, a place where the culture was forged by the heroic code of its warriors, the Rajputs. The whole cultural identity of Rajasthan is really built on this ideal of heroism. The Rajput rulers had this code. It was better to die fighting on the battlefield than to face defeat. And this wasn't just some rule for soldiers. It became the core value for the entire region. It's what people looked up to. And how did they spread this ideal? Through incredible stories. The poems and songs about these heroes were just packed with intense emotions. We're talking loyalty, friendship, love, insane valor, anger, everything. They were designed to hit you right in the gut and inspire you.
Now, the role of women in these stories is, well, it's really complex and often tragic. A lot of the time, they were the reason for the conflict, men fighting to win them or protect their honor. And they were expected to follow their heroic husbands, both in life and in death. This is where you see stories about the practice of sati, where a widow would sacrifice herself on her husband's funeral pyre. It's a really stark reminder of just how extreme this heroic code could be.
So it really makes you think, doesn't it? How do these epic stories, these legends of heroes and sacrifice, how do they stick around and continue to shape how a place sees itself, even today, hundreds of years later? Okay, we've gone all across medieval India and collected our ingredients, so let's bring it all back together and look at the final recipe for a culture. So what have we learned? Basically, a regional culture isn't just one thing. It's a mix. It's the whole shebang. You need a common language, you need unique religious traditions, you need distinctive art and architecture, performing arts that are supported and shaped by patrons, and of course, those shared stories and heroic values. But maybe the most important takeaway is this. Culture is never done. It's not a finished product. It's always changing, always evolving. It's like this constant, vibrant dance between local traditions and new influences from the outside. And that really brings it back to us, right here, right now. We've looked at how cultures were made in the past, but that process is still happening. So I'll leave you with this question. What are the forces, the ingredients, that are shaping the culture of your region today? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.